So I can see we're starting to get some participants here, so we'll give it a minute or so to allow people to enter, and then we'll get started. We have lots of students joining in. All right. So I think we're going to get started here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. My name's Dave Hubbard, and I work with the OCDSB. Very, very excited to have Amr here, who's going to be talking about designing a career in design and their experience navigating the pathway towards a career in design and architecture and that world. So thank you so much for being here, Amr. And for students that are interested, we have the Q&A feature open to ask questions, okay? We will save some time at the end of the presentation to make sure we get through some of those questions. So please feel free if you're listening in and you have some curiosity or some questions, make sure you're putting those in the chat so we can address those. And without further ado, Amr, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. And I'm just going to share screen over here. All right. So welcome, everyone. My name's Amir Shirazi, and I really, really appreciate all of you making time to be here today. I want to start by just offering my thanks, and I hope this session is informative for you and valuable for you. A lot of it is going to be focused on design and a pathway into design, but really there's a lot that I think I'll speak to that can apply to any profession, and actually will extend beyond professional work and academic work. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A at the end. So just a quick kind of overview of what I'll be going through. There'll be a bit of an introduction. I'm going to speak about Arcadis, which is the company that I work for, and then I'll speak a bit about my pathway, my journey into architecture. And then along the way, we'll cover off a little bit about what design is, what architects do, what kind of skill sets you need, and then very importantly, the Q&A and the discussion piece. I'm going to move fast because I've got quite a few slides over here, and I want to make sure we get time to chat at the end. So we'll start with the introduction. My name is Amir Shirazi. I'm an associate principal and a studio manager with Arcadis. Arcadis is a global architecture and engineering firm. And I'm a first-generation Pakistani-Canadian immigrant. Came to Canada a little over 24 years ago, and I currently live and work in Toronto. So I won't spend too long on this. The first few slides are just about Arcadis. It's really to say that we're a big company, and we have offices all around the world, predominantly in Europe and North America. That's important for us because it really kind of provides us with a lot of brains to pick in terms of creativity and design and influences. And we do a whole host of different things, but a few of the major things that we do that I'm involved with are architecture. And architecture is predominantly, in terms of the work that I'm involved with, high-rise buildings. High-rise buildings are basically tall buildings, generally above 12 stories tall. And these are a couple examples of projects in the city in Toronto that I've been involved with. And we also do what are called mid-rise buildings, which are typically 12 stories or lower. And I'm gonna blaze through these next few slides to get to the real kind of meat of the presentation. We also do something called placemaking. What is placemaking? And it's honestly quite literally the making of places, and it involves a few different professions that work with architects. So there's master planners that master plan communities. There's landscape architects that work on a lot of the non-building sort of areas, the green spaces, parks, open spaces, they do the landscape design, and then urban designers that help kind of stitch architecture and landscape and a few other things together. And all of that combined is placemaking. And so this is a quick kind of snapshot of a master planned community where architects have worked on buildings and landscape architects have worked on park designs, and there's urban designers that have had influences on the road network and other things. So it's all about collaboration, cross profession collaboration and communication, and the exchange of creativity. And I'll speak to more of that during the course of the presentation. These are just kind of quick examples or images. This is a project under construction in Mississauga near Square One called Exchange District. And this is a kind of open space between buildings. So this is less about architecture and more about the open space design where architecture is there in the background. I'm one person, and any success I've had is down to the absolutely amazing and talented team that I have. I'm lucky enough to lead a team of over 20 different architects and designers from different parts of the world, all of whom bring their individual ideas and identity to the table. And that's a real kind of privilege for me to have access to and for me to collaborate with them on a daily basis. We're working on a combined probably 70 plus buildings at the moment all over the Greater Toronto area. I have done work in Ottawa, I've done work in Calgary as well in the last sort of decade. Before I get into a bit of background on how I got into the profession, I just thought I'd share a design example of a project that I worked on many years ago in Calgary. And this was sort of an early kind of conceptual image of a 2-tower project. And we had a podium over here, or a base of the building that's actually parking behind all of this kind of gray kind of textured concrete. And this is a busy highway along the right side of the image. And we looked at this and we felt that it just lacked personality. And so this is where the kind of engineering and the practical aspect and the art that's there in architecture intersect. And we just felt that it needed some color, it needed something that would visually kind of anchor the building on this highway. And so given that from these towers, this is a Calgary project, you have a beautiful view of the Rocky Mountains. We actually found an image of a texture from inside the rock from the Rocky Mountains that was this beautiful colored pattern. So we said, you know what, why don't we just create these boxes that can hang off of the building that will add some kind of visual break and add some color and personality to this building so that it's visible from very, very far away. And we proposed that, and our client was very excited by that. And that's ultimately what got built. So, you know, we went from a concept render to an actual building that lives and breathes over there now. And it's those kind of moments of inspiration and creativity that we really live for in our profession, where you get to have an idea, you get to have an opinion, you get to voice it, it gets heard, and it gets realized, and thousands of people get to interact with it and critique the idea. And they may like it, they may not like it, but that's the beauty of the profession, that you know you get to work on these objects and these structures that are physical and tangible. A couple more pictures of the same project. But before we look at more buildings, I want to take a step back and talk a bit about how I got here, and more importantly, why I got here. And for that, I've got to get a little bit into my journey into architecture. And my journey began actually a very, very long time ago. And high school was kind of a really, really important part of my journey. But if I were to be honest, it began prior to that in my childhood. And so I was born here in Pakistan, in the south city over there called Karachi. But I did my growing up between Pakistan and Dubai. and before I moved to Canada, where I finished my high school. And I bring that up because in my time, and I didn't realize this till I was much older, but in my time in Pakistan, I was exposed to tons of things that uh, really, really influenced my design work and my ability to deal with people, both of which are very, very, fundamental pieces of what I do on a daily basis. So I was exposed to valleys and mountain ranges and deserts and coastlines and very, very dense kind of urban environments. And there's shapes and there's patterns and there's color and texture. Um, Pakistan used to be part of India, which uh, was a British colony for many years, and through that, there's a lot of different influences. I mean, we see Mughal influences in the architecture and the open space design. We see colonial architecture. We see post-colonial architecture. Um, Big words aside, it's all to say that there's a lot of different ideas and a lot that I was exposed to as a kid that I wasn't even fully kind of thinking about in architectural terms. It was just a mental library of form and texture and geometry. And then there was other stuff that's just cultural. Public buses over there that are colored with beautiful motifs and patterns and geometries that all and fabrics that all started to kind of build up a database of shapes and objects and an interest in color and design. And so in my childhood, my interests were really drawing and painting, and I call creative Legoing, which was essentially stealing my older brother's Lego and throwing away the script or throwing away the instructions and kind of doing my own thing. And I came to realize this is a very kind of fundamental part of my personality. And the reason for that is if I followed the instructions that I got with the Lego, I knew what the outcome would be. And that didn't interest me. It didn't spark any curiosity. I wanted to understand what could be done with the same component parts if I tried to be creative with it. Um, and then I got to high school, and I still love to do the same things. I still love to draw and I still love to paint, but I also learned that I had an interest in English and philosophy and photography and graphic design, amongst other things. And here's a couple sketches from my time in high school. Sorry, it's a little bit laggy at my end. These images will load in a second. Just different explorations of shape and form, even at an early age. And I love to draw cartoons. Objects and stationery, just kind of thinking could take simple objects and stretch them and be creative with them. I apologize for the lag. I'm gonna just keep cycling through some of these. Some of these drawings and sketches in my application when I applied to undergraduate school. Out of high school, when I eventually applied to architecture school, I didn't have many actual architectural pieces at all. I had a couple sketches of some buildings, but at that point, for undergraduate school, the people on the selection committee are really interested about you, your background, your creativity, your ability to understand objects and communicate things graphically. There's no expectation that you can kind of design a building. There are programs that have architectural courses, and many of you may have access to that, but I chose at this point to go a different path. Okay. I'm going to just skip ahead a few slides to keep moving along. I had a lot of interest in people and places. So these were all kind of sketches from my time in high school. These were the kind of quote unquote architectural pieces that I did include in my portfolio. So I got out of high school and I actually didn't apply to architecture school. I got into advertising and I worked there for a year. And in my time in advertising, I learned about networking and presentations and selling ideas, and I did a lot of Excel work. I didn't enjoy all of it, but those were phenomenal experiences for me. And I decided to leave advertising, and I had a choice at that point. I had two things that I was very interested in. One was architecture, and the other one was opening a restaurant. And so at that point, I chose to open a restaurant. And then the recession hit, and my restaurant closed down. But I gained a lot of experience managing people and learning about accounting and managing a business. But I also hit a bit of a wall because following the restaurant and following advertising, I was at an all-time low. I became depressed and I missed creativity. I missed drawing. I missed interacting with people in a creative capacity. And so I had a lot of discussions with a mentor that I have, my older brother, whose Lego I used to destroy as a child, and decided that I want to apply to architecture school. And with a lot of support and encouragement from him, I decided to do so. And at this point, I want to just bring up this definition of design that has been really, really fundamental in the way I've approached my career. Design is a plan for arranging elements in such a way as best to accomplish a particular purpose. What I wanted to do was I wanted to get into architecture school. And so I said, okay, well, what are the component parts? Credits and portfolio. So I went to night school. I upgraded my credits. I developed my portfolio further, applied to architecture school, and I got in. And the rest is history. And as soon as I got back into architecture school, I got to pick up the pen again. I got to sketch again. I got to see things in a different way. I got to communicate and explore things graphically again after many years. And that was, it was like being born again. It was a really, really kind of beautiful phase in my journey and in my profession. And I got to explore shape and form. Sorry, guys, the PDF's not liking my sketches. Very laggy. And look, I'm going to go to the next slide, which was an early project where it's just going to load in a second. We took a simple object like a garlic press, and it's all about now trying to understand how a simple object functions. That's the beginning of your journey, the beginning of your education. And how do you graphically represent that? How do you pull the object apart, understand how it's assembled, and communicate that visually? And you grow from there. And I'm just going to kind of skip ahead. These were some projects coming out of school that I used to apply to graduate school, where once you get to that point in your education, you do need architectural projects. So this was just a kind of community center, some 2D and some 3-dimensional images to kind of communicate the design. I won't spend too long on these. An exploration of a cabin in the woods. It's a simple kind of typical house geometry that you would draw as a kid, and flipping that on its head, literally reversing it and kind of developing a building that is that kind of house shape, but where the top of the house is actually used as structure to support it so that you have views above a lake. Okay. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We can come back to some of these as part of Q&A. And what I would really like to highlight is that all of the things that I did in my childhood, in my high school, but also through advertising in the restaurant, including networking, including presentations, including understanding business principles and accounting, I use all of that in architecture. I now kind of manage a mini studio within the company. And I have to worry about payroll. I have to worry about contracts and a lot of the things that I did as part of the restaurant. And so I want to kind of just pause here and look at some key takeaways from this first part of the presentation. And that is, number one, don't be afraid to challenge your assumptions about yourself. I had several moments where I doubted myself, whether I doubted whether I'd made the right choices. And those were kind of important milestones in my journey in my career. And with the support of close family, I decided to challenge myself and actually say, you know what, I think I can actually pursue a career in design. It's not too late. Make your experiences count. You know, I've highlighted that already, but anything and everything you do, if you've been on a sports team, if you've been part of the UM club, you know about leadership, you know about interacting with people, you know about how to balance multiple commitments, school and an extracurricular. All of that counts in any profession that you decide to sort of get into. And lastly, for this point in the presentation, find a great mentor. It can be somebody in your profession, it can be somebody in your family circle, in an educational circle, whether it's a counselor. You can have multiple mentors, but there is absolutely no shame and an immense amount of value in listening to people like myself that have struggled, that have been there, that have learned lessons the hard way, that maybe you don't need to learn the hard way. Don't be afraid to ask questions and engage with people that are further down the road that can have some advice that can make your path a little bit easier, a little bit gentler, that can lead you to professional and personal success a little bit easier. Okay. Before I wrap up and we get to Q&A, I just want to share a couple of projects that I'm involved with that have come out of my design studio. This is in Regent Park in Toronto. It's a 34-story building with a cafe at grade. Played a lot with angles and kind of sharp geometries over here. And I'm going to go quick. This is one that's recently completed. This is an early concept image. It's on Church Street, about a 5-minute walk from Dundas Square in Toronto. And here's an image of the building completed. And you can see there's a real kind of likeness between the early concept image and the final building, which we're very kind of proud of. We went with a really kind of clean industrial sort of aesthetic over here. And again, concept versus this is in progress under construction shot. And on the reverse side of the building, we actually had down here in the corner some public art that we proposed to the city, and that's now done. This is an artist, a local artist that we worked with to just, you know, add some color and visual relief on the street. Another mid-rise building, a concept image versus should load in a second, the actual built building. This is completed this year as well. And a couple other buildings. And what you'll see in some of these buildings, this is probably a good example, is a likeness between a lot of the sketches that explored black and white kind of ink forms and what we've ended up. So a lot of my early interests and kind of, you know, sketching and sort of design aesthetic has not been lost, but it's kind of played a major impact on the way I design buildings now. Again, lots of play of pattern and kind of strong visuals. I'm going to fast track through these. There's about 20 other buildings I would have loved to have shared, but I know we're tight on time, so I'm just going to kind of fast forward to my closing notes. This is one that is actually a very cool project at Lawrence Spadina across from UTS in Toronto. And there's a really large glass atrium, and we're working with a local Indigenous architect on ways to bring indigeneity to that atrium. So it'll not only kind of pay homage to the history of that site, but also provide some meaningful art. And again, I want to just thank my immensely talented team for the work that you just saw. None of it was done in isolation. And to conclude, again, make your experiences count. Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions about yourself. Find a great mentor. And please, at some point, if you find yourself, and you will, at a point in your life where you have any experience that you can offer others that can help make their pathway a little bit easier, please do so. And I like to end every presentation with my biggest sort of source of inspiration, and that is my son. And I bring that up because I get to see him, and this is a totally photoshopped image, by the way. That's not actually him sketching. But I see the sense of wonder and the joy he gets from creating when he sketches, when he plays with blocks. And I think we lose that as we grow up. And the beauty of any kind of design-based profession is that you get to hang on to a bit of that playfulness and creativity and that sense of wonder. And so I owe a lot of that to my son, and I'm grateful that I get to kind of renew my perspective every day playing with him. Thank you all. We'll open it up for Q&A. I've left my email address in case there are questions that I don't get to. Don't hesitate to drop me a line, and I'll do my best to send you a note and respond.
Amazing, Amr. Thank you for the amazing presentation here. We've got a lot of curious questions here. So our first one that we'll start with is, if I'm looking into urban or environmental design, do I need a specialization for it, or is an architecture degree enough?
You can pursue urban design. I'm not sure about environmental design. It really depends on how far you want to go in terms of, undergrad versus grad school. I know a number of people that have done architecture for undergrad and then done a sort of graduate degree in urban design and ultimately pursued that sort of pathway. But having that architectural kind of base is really, really influenced and had, it's allowed them to sort of speak two languages, the big picture and the small picture language together. So there's no kind of prescriptive pathway. You can also just pursue a straight pathway in urban design. Really depends on what you're interested in and where you want to work.
Amazing. Would you say that an art course in high school is necessary for someone going into architecture, or would you strongly encourage someone to take an art course while in high school if they're going this pathway?
I would encourage you to do so. Look, I get asked a lot whether being able to draw and sketch is essential, and the answer is no. Increasingly, with technology, with modeling software, with AI now, and tech, it's less and less important. But there's still a large amount of interacting with people in person, and the ability to whip out a pen. And you don't have to be a world-class artist, but to be able to just communicate ideas by drawing is immensely helpful to communicate ideas. But more so, the application process right now, I think to have some kind of background in art is a huge asset. There are programs in Ontario that exist that do have kind of architecture in high school, and you can put a portfolio together exclusively with those courses. But I find that the portfolios that I've reviewed that have art in there, they do a much better job of idea and creativity exploration and communication to the panel that will evaluate you as a candidate for undergraduate school. So don't worry if you don't have, sort of, if you're worried about skill level, I would still recommend taking it.
Thank you, Amr. You just touched on it briefly, but we have a question about AI. So the question is, do you think AI will affect the future of architecture and the amount of jobs available in this industry?
Yes, I'm actually quite optimistic about AI. Look, there's been a few technological revolutions. I mean, I work with some people that are quite senior. where they used to draw everything by hand, 3D, 2D, and then AutoCAD came along, and then Revit came along. And there were several revolutions with technology. AI is major and it's on a whole other scale, but it's a tool. And ultimately, as long as the user, the designer, kind of controls the parameters, what it does is it's going to provide you with a way to ideate, to explore different ideas, many more ideas quicker. And I think the design outcomes coming out of that can be quite a bit stronger. I'll give you an example. We have a building where we're using a kind of Art Deco influence for the overall architecture. And at the ground floor, there's an entrance where all of the residents who live in that building, they come in. And there's a frame and a kind of decorative element around that portal to get into the building. Now, I can go online and I can start to Google images of Art Deco buildings and details and try and do a bit of research to get inspired. I can travel. But AI has access to not 10 or 100, but thousands, millions of images. And if I were to take a very kind of simple sketch or a shot from my model and plug it into an AI software, it can generate a bunch of images. I still choose where I want to go. And I still have to figure out technically how I'm going to build that. I have to figure out the details. I have to work with fabricators, but it's going to throw a whole bunch of ideas that may open possibilities I may not have considered otherwise. To me, that's a great thing because the outcome is still in line with where I would have wanted to go, but the creative possibilities are on another level. And it's not all about design. There's other kind of things that AI can present that will allow creative people to spend more time creating and less time doing, quote unquote, admin things that are maybe a little bit less exciting but necessary parts of the profession.
Thank you, Amr. We have some questions regarding salary of someone going into architecture. So can you provide some details on what someone might expect at an entry-level position leaving a program in architecture versus someone who's maybe, advanced a little bit more in that career, what they can expect for salary?
Sure. Look, the windows are quite expansive, and it really depends on what you do. I would say if you're quote unquote going mainstream, you're going to undergraduate school, doing a graduate degree, and you start at a reasonably big firm, you're probably in that, yes, I would say 65 to 70K range to start. Don't kind of quote me on that. It does differ from firm to firm. Um, I have a whole bunch of friends that got into kind of contracting and they do design, but they also do contracting. You can make, if money is more of a kind of focal point, and everyone's path is different, their priorities and their needs are different. So they've made a bit more money quicker going down that path because there's contracting involved. And then there's others that have gotten into sort of very kind of small boutique firms that are very, very creative and artistic. And just because of scale and having less work at any given point, they've been at the lower end of pay. But I would say, let's say 60 to 70 is a reasonable kind of place to start.
Perfect,
How hard
thank
is
you.
the work? It's hard is a very kind of subjective term. How challenging? Challenging to me, I hear challenging and I think hard, but I also think rewarding because it's something that you can overcome, and then the harder you work to overcome a challenge, the more rewarding it is. Yeah, it's not a profession that is for the lighthearted. It's a profession that requires a lot of inspiration and engagement and kind of interest and passion.
Perfect. Are there any schools you recommend specifically for studying architecture in post-secondary?
Sure. Look, I went to TMU, so Toronto Metropolitan University. At the time, it was called Ryerson. Um, Waterloo is a fantastic school. Different schools have different focuses. At TMU, you can choose whether you want to specialize in project management or building science, which does have a bit more of a focus on sustainability, which is a fantastic sort of area to specialize in, especially now, given where the industry is going. And what I found really unique about TMU versus Carleton or Waterloo is the fact that it's located downtown. So, you're walking to school, you're leaving class, you're meeting friends in the city, you're surrounded by buildings, good buildings, bad buildings, buildings under construction. So you're just, that exposure, it just allows you to learn all the time. All of the big firms are located in the city. So for summer co-ops, for networking, historically, it's been a pretty good place to work. But, Waterloo is fantastic. They have a co-op program. TMU now is a co-op program as well after third year. Carleton is also a fantastic school. It really depends on where you live, what your circumstances are, but all three of those would be great places to start for undergrad.
Perfect. We're getting a lot of questions on how things like math and computer science intersect with architecture and how those are used in this industry. If you can provide some information on that.
Sure. Well, I use the quadratic equation like 100 times a day, uh, which is a joke. I have not touched the quadratic equation since I graduated high school. And I used to complain about all the math and all the calculus and all the stuff that you have to do. Until I realized that, look, there are a lot of things that are not about the actual math, but about developing the skill set to absorb content that is maybe difficult for you to learn. And you don't have to do mathematical sort of formulas and long calculations, but you do need to understand math from an area perspective, area calculation perspective, from a cost calculation perspective. And so you never really use calculus or any of those things, but the skill set you develop going through calculus is helpful. And look, like it or not, it's a requirement. You do have to have math, high school, senior math. I believe calc is still a requirement to apply to any architecture school. So brace yourself and you're going to have to take it on. You don't have to worry about using it to a high degree once you get past structures in your undergraduate degree. The math is a lot easier after that, but you do need it up to that point.
Amazing. We're getting a lot of different questions around the different programs students can start exposing themselves to and getting familiar with, as well as what they can do in high school to set them up for success in this field, if you're able to highlight some of those pieces.
Sure, absolutely. Look, for 2D work, AutoCAD and Revit. For 3D work, SketchUp, Rhino, and Revit. For rendering, Lumion, and those are the kind of the main ones. You'll use Word and you'll use Excel and PowerPoint. If you can also start to get exposure to any of the Adobe design software, primarily Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, those get used a lot for presentations. But for 3D modeling, SketchUp is a great place to start. It's the easiest. I believe you can download a trial version or a limited function version for free. It's very user-friendly and intuitive. And it's a great place to start. Pick an object, pick your house, pick where you live, and just try and model that in the program. And there's a lot of tutorials online that'll help you get there.
Amazing. So that answered many of the open questions that we have here. So that was great. Does architecture school give students the opportunity to learn more of the traditional styles or historic buildings as seen in older cities such as Paris or Amsterdam, or does it teach more modernist architecture is the question?
You're going to have to start from the beginning. Every architecture program is going to have a lot of art history. It's important. It's important to understand influences. A lot of them come back, but they all play a really kind of fundamental role in where we are in terms of architectural aesthetics and building systems and many things. So I have friends who've gone to Carleton and TMU and Waterloo. Everyone's done architectural history. And it's not just architecture, it's art and the intersection and the relationship between art and architecture through various kind of periods in time. And you're going to start like back in ancient Egypt and kind of find your way to today, present day, through first year and second year. That's when most of the architectural history courses are required. And they're required. You can't skip them.
Thank you. We've got a great question here. What is the most challenging project you've worked on, and what made that project challenging?
Ooh, good question. Every project does have its own unique challenges. I would say the one that I showed at the end where we're working with the Indigenous architect, that one has been very challenging because it's in an area in Toronto called the Annex, and the Annex is full of architects and landscape architects and urban designers. So you're doing work in an area where your peers live. And we've had where we typically have 2 or 3 community meetings to get feedback from the community and engage with them. We've had over 20 in that area just because it's a high profile area. And so that's been a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity because we've gotten feedback from all of these people that are in the profession. And that's allowed us to design a building that we think will be even better for it because of that kind of peer scrutiny. But just managing personalities and getting a whole bunch of creative people to agree on a particular direction, that hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. So I'd probably put that one near the top of the list.
Amazing. This could potentially be one of our final questions. We have to wrap up right at 1:35 here, but you have the email on the screen that we'll put up again. What are some different branches or paths of architecture that you can take other than urban design?
Oh, there's lots you can get into. Look, I know people that have done architecture and they've gotten into transportation engineering. So they get into like designing road networks and doing traffic analysis. I have friends that have gotten into video game, like environmental design. They've gotten into video game design. They've done, in some cases, some additional, 1 or 2 year programs to just get a bit more specialized in that area. I have friends that have gotten into architectural policy, defining guidelines, working for cities and municipalities, big cities and small cities. Others that have done single family homes, people that are working and doing design work, others that are doing more technical roles that are not design focused, but more detailing, not designing a window, but designing a hinge. And there's tons, I know people that have gotten into teaching, that have gotten to fabrication, that their focus is like 3D printing and CNCing and laser cutting, and they work for companies that do that kind of work for restaurants as part of interior decor. Really, I mean, architecture introduces you, and I may not have spent too long on it, but it introduces you to a certain language and a way of thinking about physical objects, about how they are